The Togruta are a people of contradictions, seen as elegant and beautiful, savage and tribalistic, feared for their deadly poisonous bites. Also a peaceful, egalitarian society with a forced tradition that predates the Jedi Order, while thinking grandma should be left in the woods to be eaten by an ackle if she can't run anymore. What's up, MetaNerds? This video will cover the Togruta. Everything from breaking down their planet, seeing how it influenced their biology, and how their society came to form and change over the years, giving the galaxy some of the most interesting characters of all time. So let's get started by looking at their homeworld of SHREYA. Located at grid coordinates L8 on the galactic map, in the expansion region, this is a planet with an oxygen-mixed atmosphere, temperate climate, and standard gravity. The terrain was also very similar to Earth, with large seas, plains, savannas, rainforests, and tall mountain ranges. Interestingly, Coruscant census workers have never made a count of the total population of SHREYA, but we should expect that it would at least be in the millions if they had colonies like Kyros that had 50,000 Togruta. The Togruta are said to have evolved from a common ancestor with a very similar looking but more primitive species. The tall grass that can be found all over this world was called Teru, and it had different shades of red and white stripes, resulting in a lot of species from predators to prey both having these stripes and coloring. Most Togruta fell between a height of 1.5 to 1.9 meters, or 4 feet 11 inches to 6 feet 2, making them similar to most humans and about twice the height of an Ewok. And though most had colors in the red to orange range with that white coloring, there was an incredible amount of variation. Skin color could be white, yellow, green, blue, or purple, with eye colors that were just as varied, including solid black eyes. Their average lifespan was 94 years, which is longer than humans but doesn't come close to species like Wookiees that could get well into the hundreds. But perhaps their most striking physical feature are those things on their heads. Upon first seeing them, some think that they are just ornamental headdresses, but they are actually a part of their biology. They're called montrails, and are similar to the head tails or lekus of the Twi'lek species. But despite this similarity, Coruscant biologists say that there is no reason to believe that these two species are linked, not descended from another like with the Aqualish and Harch, or the Duros and Neimoidians. These montrails were not simply fleshy appendages, but served a crucial function in their survival. They're hollow from the side of the head up, often described as the horns, and the inside is just a series of chambers that allow it to work like a massive echolocation organ, that when fully formed would give them the ability to detect prey movements within 25 meters, or 82 feet. And these montrails are present at the time of birth, eventually growing into these two horn-like protrusions above the head, and one shorter and thicker one on the back of the head. These would continue to grow throughout their lives, but really take off after adolescence. What may be the most important takeaway from studying these species is that they are proof that culture can affect your connection to the Force, as on the whole, Togruta on average have slightly less midichlorians, yet have a much higher per capita number of Force sensitives. This is thought to be due to the fact that their culture for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, was one focused on the interconnectedness of all things. From birth, they were taught to always be conscious of the feelings of others, even the animals that they hunted, trying to secure as quick and painless a death as possible, actively trying to be mindful of all the things that bound all life together. And in the case of their hunter-gatherer lifestyle, that meant understanding and accepting the circle of life. And this mindset seems to have brought their species closer to the Force, closer to being in tune with the thing that binds everything in the galaxy.
It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
Now that being said, they're not a bunch of blue milk sipping monks. The Togruta, as well as the Thespasian species, scared a lot of other beings with how they eat. Their large incisors would go right for the spinal cord of small rodents like the Thymirs, killing them instantly, but the Togruta would also eat the rodent while it was still spasming. These death throes were perceived by outsiders as the Thymirs reacting to a deadly poison, injected via the Togruta's snake-like fangs. Most wouldn't remember their high school xenobiology well enough to understand what was going on, and many Togruta used this to their advantage, leaning into the myth that they had a deadly poisonous bite, and watching as off-worlders treated them with more fear and respect. Many of the ways that they would connect to their environment for hunting purposes morphed into a reverence of this connection in later religious ideas. Their montrails made them connected to the air pressure and sound waves, and they would hunt without shoes to feel the ground and sense any movement. And thus later beliefs would make this idea more abstract, and you start getting ideas that covering the head, tails, or feet were seen as ways of cutting you off from what we would call the Force. So they weren't just clothing choices, but something with a spiritual significance. This hunter tradition also influenced the village layout and architecture. They would all pack into communal living quarters, with the families all on top of each other, all codependent for gathering resources. As soon as you were able to throw a spear, you would join in the hunts. The whole village would hunt together, and each would share the food equally. Some outsiders held up this egalitarian society as a model to copy, but they conveniently overlooked the Togruta's other unique social practices. It was rare for a Togruta to die of old age. Most of those who died did so during the hunts, falling behind and being left by their friends and families, injured by the animal or environment, or just outright being killed by the local wildlife. The Togruta would not help anyone who couldn't make it on their own. It could be anything from a broken leg to sickness. If you could not recover and make it back under your own power, you were left in the field. Most outsiders saw this as a chilling coldness of these people, but the Togruta tied it back to their view on the circle of life. If this person was not healthy enough to continue on by themselves, they should no longer take the life of a healthy creature killed during the hunt, or consume the resources gathered from the land. Ahsoka would keep up most of the traditions of her people, but likely would have opposed this ideology with her exposure to the Jedi Order. She is one of the most compassionate Jedi we meet, always concerned about helping those that can't help themselves, even droids. So I can't imagine she would let a mother die alone in a jungle, being ripped apart by predators, just because this Mama Gruta slipped and broke her leg. But because they saw this weakness as something to let die off quickly, they were also proud to display their vitality. Togruta were often seen wearing the pelts or bone jewelry made from their prey, being both a sign of adulthood and then later one of the only sorts of status symbols in their society. Togruta would be most impressed by the teeth of the Akal, a large meat-eater on Shili that was one of the only beasts to pose a serious threat to the hunters. An orange-furred, four-legged predator that stalked the grasslands and jungles, like an enormous lion or tiger. Though almost everything was done communally, to wear the Akal teeth you had to kill it by yourself. These teeth would be combined with native metals, stones, and pearls. And then to hold them in place, they actually used a sort of glue, applied right to the face and at the start of the Montrail. Proof of how much this meant to the Togruta was that both Ahsoka and Shaak Ti retained them even in the Jedi Order. Despite whatever critiques other Jedi might have that it glorifies violence or was too indulgent of their personal ego, neither of these Jedi gave them up. Instead, they incorporated them into their Jedi outfits. While human Padawans are easily recognized by a single braid as sported by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, with these rigid Montrails, Togruta had a difficult time showing their dedication to the Jedi Order. That's where the Silka beads come in. Those are the beads slung over Ahsoka's head, but like we see with Shaak Ti, they would be retained as they rose through the ranks. It makes it so the ornaments on their head are a nice merging of the Togruta culture and Jedi tradition. Now because they were so connected to their families, in a way the whole village was a closely knit extended family, there were almost none that left their world, at least not voluntarily. The only thing that really drew them away was the Jedi Order. Their planet was discovered by the Republic around 25,000 BBY, but the draw of a galactic economy, the pleasures and adventures that came with it, seemed to have been generally ignored by the Togruta. But there were Togruta Jedi since the earliest days of the Order. And over those thousands of years, there are a lot of notable individuals. Rana Te was one of the most frightening beings in Jedi history, being a part of the Watch Circle within the Jedi Covenant around 3900 BBY. Her deep connection to the Force had always given her intense nightmares since childhood, and she and other members of the Circle were having visions that one of their Padawans would become a powerful Sith Lord. To stop this, the Masters all agreed to execute their students during the knighting ceremony. All but one, the Padawan that would be framed for it. And there were some other Jedi during this era, like Burn, Bella Kilwix, Ashara Zavros, Dinah Roth, Pala Maslin, Raylon Nis, and Skohani Ren. While there were a few involved in the Republic government and military as well, like diplomat KORU TAMA, and Republic military officials like Dejan. There were strategic service majors called the Bliss, Meldo, and Yodish, as well as Captain YELTO and Dr. Sonoda. This era even saw some Togruta pirates like Ali, and even a crime boss named Bozwed. Believe it or not, there was even a Togruta that joined the Mandalorian war effort, with Garen Borm becoming a field marshal. Though the Mandos were not a strong force-worshipping culture, in fact they would despise the sorcery. In almost all other ways, these closely knit survival of the fittest warriors were surprisingly similar to the Togruta. And then there was Darth Yoon, a Sith Lord during the Third Galactic War of the Old Republic era as well. And like I said, these individuals were rare. They really never got involved in the galaxy at large. We don't see tons of other colonies or them in great numbers anywhere else. Should also be pointed out that after contact from the galaxy-spanning, high-tech, spacefaring civilization of the Republic, it doesn't appear like the Togruta ever got involved in high-tech industry. Nothing like what we see with the Mon Calamari. who were just in their local star system when they were discovered, but grew to have some of the best tech in the galaxy, even eventually overthrowing Kuat Drive Yards as the largest shipwright. It seems like the only Togruta that would be involved in high tech were those that left Shili. The only colony they ever had was on the planet Kiros. And even though their buildings are not primitive, this is still not a colony focused on industry.
The artisan colony of the planet Kiros created a society without weapons. Instead of war, they pursued art and beauty.
We know that it had a population of over 50,000, so still plenty of Togruta to feel their strong social connections. And interestingly, they were all pacifists, having no weapons at all. And so perhaps their reason for leaving Shili was to live in a society that took some of their ideas further, thinking that they could keep the communal peace towards each other without the whole abandoning the weak part. And maybe they even stopped killing animals for their own survival. That's just speculation, but the colony has a lot of greenery, but no animals. Though they could have easily had them imported, I just wouldn't be surprised if they gave up the hunt as well, living in this peace and love artisan commune. Before the Clone Wars, there was ELLIN Law, who was killed in 67 BBY by Darth Plagueis right after he carried out the Sith tradition of killing his master. But you do still see the traces of her people's tradition, even as a transporter, with some clues making it seem more like she was a smuggler, as she was working for the Hutts at the time she was killed. But nonetheless, she was still adamant that everyone on her crew was equal. In fact, Plagueis got upset at the result of a group vote decision, which led to the death of her crew and her decapitation. And there was even a Togruta Chancellor of the Republic, Karami's Kaj, who was in office around 40 BBY, and who took care to aid Master Qui-Gon Jinn. During the Clone Wars era, there was of course Shaak Ti and Ahsoka, and even the youngling Ashala. Confusingly, Ahsoka would take the name Ashala when she went into hiding after Order 66. She took it from the ancient name of the light side in earlier Jedi traditions, but it would have been funny if this is how her cover was blown, some inquisitor thinking that the youngling had survived. But we also got to note that each of these Jedi suffered deep depression at being separated from their people, which is somewhat true for all Jedi, who at least sometimes wondered about their family. But Shaak Ti gives us more detail on why this was particularly hard for the Togruta, saying their tight communal upbringing, even if discovered when just a few years old, was something incredibly jarring to be ripped out of. Being around other Togruta had become something that their biology depended on, kind of like how solitary confinement drives humans insane. There's hints in the lore that it must be something like pheromones or certain kind of brain chemicals that are released when engaging with members of their species, developed over eons of evolution to reinforce the advantageous aspects of their communal living environment. So being ripped away from this sent Shaak Ti into dangerously deep depression. And though we don't have accounts of this from Ahsoka, just imagine how tough it must have been for her to come to accept the Jedi and then have to leave this replacement family too, feeling like she couldn't fit in with the Togruta or the Jedi, and then truly alone after Order 66, where she sometimes would go for months alone, making her home in starships or in remote caves. And just a couple other Togruta I want to mention. This era also had Karshoda, who was part of Prego's circus. If you look, she has a very strange montrails. Perhaps that's what got her in the circus in the first place. Maybe they're hinting at something like she was in a freak show. And then there was the governor of Kiros, Rashti. In the Imperial era, there was a Togruta professor named SHREYA ORDASSA, and a Togruta bounty hunter, Kaveri Ra. So that's it for the Togruta, their biology, history, and famous members. The only behind the scenes stuff is a funny observation. During the Old Republic era, Imperial Grand Moff KILRAN had to forcibly put down a Togruta uprising. And thousands of years later, the man who would come to be known as Grand Moff Tarkin absolutely hated Ahsoka Tano, despising the fact that he was outranked by a child, and going so far as to ask for the death penalty during her trial. If you have any requests for future species videos, be sure to comment them down below. Leave a like and comment if you liked it, it does help with the YouTube algorithm. And be sure to subscribe if you want to see more. Be sure to check out the description for ways to support this channel for free, pick up cool Star Wars art or free audiobooks, as well as our Patreon and PayPal. For just $1, your name could be here. And special shout out to our $25 tier, Chris Garcia, Andrew Ban, Seraph Diaz, Cass Costello, and Carlos Velez. But most important of all, remember, just because they aren't poisonous, doesn't mean you should pick a fight with a Togruta and end up fighting the entire village. And the Force will be with you, always.